Imagine this. Your little girl, born nonverbal, sitting quietly on the porch when HOA Karen storms up demanding answers. She can't speak, but Karen doesn't care. She calls the cops on your child for refusing to answer questions. And when you arrive, you're not just her father, you're the county prosecutor. Tonight, Karen and her HOA aren't just facing fines, they're facing the full weight of the law. It was a warm Saturday morning when everything began. My daughter, Emily, sat on the wooden swing outside our ranch house, her sketchbook resting on her lap. At 9 years old, she was as bright as any child could be. But she had been born nonverbal. Words weren't her way. Instead, she painted, she drew, she laughed through signs and expressions. To me, she was perfect. But to people like Karen, president of our HOA, she was strange, uncooperative, a problem. I'd learned to ignore Karen's whispers, her judgmental stares, the way she looked at Emily as though silence was defiance. But that morning, ignoring wasn't an option. I was inside brewing coffee when I heard it, the sharp, accusing tone of Karen's voice slicing through the peaceful morning air. "Excuse me, young lady," she barked. I stepped to the window. There she was, Karen, in her usual pastel blazer, clipboard clutched like a weapon. She towered over Emily, who was frozen on the swing, clutching her sketchbook tighter. Karen's voice grew sharper. "When I ask you a question, you answer. That's how this community works. Now what are you drawing? Are you vandalizing HOA property?" Emily lowered her gaze, her hands trembling over the sketch. Karen tapped her foot, lips curling. "Silent treatment? That's not allowed here." My jaw clenched. I was already heading for the door when Karen did the unthinkable. She pulled out her phone. "Yes, police? I need officers immediately. There's a child here refusing to answer questions. Suspicious behavior." I froze on the porch steps. She had just called the cops on my nonverbal daughter. 10 minutes later, 2 patrol cars rolled up, lights flashing. My neighbors gathered at their windows and fences, whispering. Emily sat stiff as a statue, tears welling in her eyes. Karen ran to meet the officers. "Thank goodness! This child has been sitting here refusing to speak or identify herself. It's suspicious. She might be trespassing." The officers looked confused. One of them crouched beside Emily. "Sweetheart, what's your name?" Emily clutched her sketchbook tighter, shaking her head. She couldn't answer. Karen folded her arms. "See? Defiant. Exactly what I said." That was enough. I stormed forward, flashing the leather badge from my belt. "Back off, Karen." The officers straightened. "Sir?" I met their eyes. "This is my daughter. She's nonverbal. She communicates through art and sign language. And you just got called out here because this woman doesn't understand disability law." Karen scoffed. "Nonverbal? That's just an excuse. Children should respect authority." I turned, slowly, deliberately, so every neighbor watching could hear me. "Karen, you didn't just harass my daughter. You weaponized law enforcement against a disabled child. That's not only disgusting, it's illegal." The officers shifted uncomfortably. One of them muttered, "He's right. This could fall under false reporting, maybe even discrimination." Karen's face went pale. That night, I pulled every statute, every piece of case law, every ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, protection I knew. And I knew them all, because I was the one who prosecuted cases like these. False police reports, harassment, civil rights violations, abuse of power under HOA authority. By Monday morning, the case file sat thick on my desk. And guess whose name was on the front? Karen Barnes, HOA president. The trial drew a crowd. Neighbors who had suffered under Karen's rule filled the benches, whispering in anticipation. Emily sat beside me, clutching her sketchbook, her tiny hand gripping mine. Karen walked in with her lawyer, smug as ever, until she saw me sitting at the prosecutor's table. Her face twisted in shock. "You?" I stood, buttoning my suit jacket. "That's right. I'm prosecuting this case." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Conflict of interest?" I shook my head. "My role is statutory. The county assigned me. Karen called the police on a disabled child. This is bigger than my family. This is about the law." Karen's lawyer sputtered, but it didn't matter. The evidence was airtight. The 911 recording of Karen's voice, the body cam footage of her berating Emily, witness statements from half the neighborhood. And then came the sketch. Emily had drawn the entire scene: Karen's angry face, the flashing lights, the officers standing awkwardly. Without words, she had captured the truth. The courtroom went silent as I held it up. This is how a child remembers the day her disability was treated as a crime. This is the evidence of emotional harm. Karen's lawyer buried his head in his hands. The jury didn't take long. Guilty on all counts: false reporting, harassment, discrimination. The judge's gavel cracked. "Mrs. Barnes, you are hereby removed from the HOA presidency, fined $75,000, and barred from holding any future position of community authority." The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Karen stumbled, her face red with humiliation. "You can't do this to me. I am the HOA." I stepped closer, my voice steady. "Not anymore. You're just a neighbor who forgot compassion." Karen's empire collapsed overnight. Without her, the HOA restructured. The community voted in new leadership, people who valued empathy, fairness, and respect. Emily's sketchbook became the symbol of change. Neighbors asked her to draw murals, to bring color back into a neighborhood that Karen had drained with her rules. And me? I tucked away the file that ended Karen's reign, proud not just as a prosecutor, but as a father who refused to let silence be mistaken for weakness. Emily tugged my sleeve one evening, signing with her hands. "Safe now." I smiled, hugging her tight. "Always, sweetheart, always."